The most powerful medicines in human history were never invented in a laboratory. They were not patented, never advertised in a magazine, never sold behind a counter. Almost all of them have been quietly erased from public memory in less than a century, and the reason is more uncomfortable than most people are willing to admit out loud. They worked too well. They cost almost nothing. And they grew everywhere on Earth, free for anyone with enough memory to recognize them. While the modern world learned to run to a pharmacy for every small ache, cough, cut, or sleepless night, the plants that carried humanity through plagues, wars, famines, and centuries without hospitals kept growing exactly where they always had. In the cracks of your sidewalk. Along the edges of every dirt road. In the forgotten corners of every backyard and farm. Hidden in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone to remember they exist. By the end of this video, you are going to look at the ground beneath your feet very differently than you do right now. Today I am going to walk you through 21 of these forgotten medicinal plants, carefully ordered to build toward a final revelation that will quietly rearrange the way you understand the entire modern pharmacy. Stay until the very end, because the most extraordinary plant on this list is the unassuming wild weed that became the foundation of the entire painkiller industry, after a chemist isolated a single molecule from it, threw the rest of the plant away, and called the result progress. The original whole plant still grows in roadside ditches across the world today. Almost no one remembers what it is called. We will name it together. Along the way you will also meet the flower medieval soldiers carried into open warfare specifically to seal infected wounds, the small plant whose tiny yellow flowers create such an intense numbing sensation in the mouth that most people actually laugh out loud the first time they try it, the orange berry that Russian cosmonauts trusted in outer space to protect their bodies against radiation, and the strange lichen quietly hanging from forest trees that destroys some of the antibiotic resistant bacteria modern medicine is losing its grip on. None of this is folklore. All of it has modern clinical evidence behind it. And finally, the one plant you almost certainly already have sitting inside your kitchen cabinet right now. A plant so familiar that you stopped truly seeing it years ago, and yet so powerful that ancient civilizations dedicated entire temple rituals to it. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel, because I am constantly publishing exactly this kind of forgotten healing knowledge here. Ancient remedies. Natural medicine. Essential oils. The wisdom your body still recognizes the moment it hears it. So let us begin with the first plant. A bright orange flower you have very likely walked past hundreds of times in your life without ever realizing what you were looking at. Calendula. Also called pot marigold. This radiant little bloom has one of the most battle-tested reputations in all of herbal medicine, and the people who relied on it were not gentle herbalists in slippers. They were medieval soldiers carrying calendula petals onto open battlefields specifically to treat infected wounds. They called it the war flower, because when there was no surgeon, no sterile equipment, and no antibiotics, calendula could keep a deep cut from going septic and bring the skin back together cleanly. Modern clinical studies have now confirmed precisely what those warriors knew through experience. Calendula speeds wound healing, calms inflamed skin, and protects against the opportunistic microbes that turn small injuries into life-threatening problems. The flowers carry compounds called triterpenoids and flavonoids that show real activity against harmful microbes in laboratory testing. You can soak dried calendula petals slowly in oil for several weeks, strain them out, and what remains in that jar will outperform most drugstore creams on a burn or a scrape. The reason almost no one talks about this anymore is brutally simple. A flower cannot be patented. There is no profit in something growing freely in a garden. But the emergency room is not always inside a hospital. Sometimes it is 2 feet behind your back door, glowing orange in the morning sun. Number 2. Yarrow. The soldier's herb that has stopped bleeding wounds for more than 3,000 years of recorded human history. Yarrow contains compounds that genuinely shorten clotting time at the site of an injury, and the evidence for this is not theoretical. Greek soldiers carried it onto the fields of Troy. Roman legionnaires packed it into open cuts on long campaigns far from home. Civil War medics turned to it when supplies ran low. Soldiers in 2 world wars dried it and tucked it into field kits when nothing else was available. And in every single one of those eras, across completely different continents and centuries, it worked. Modern research has now confirmed what those soldiers learned with their own hands. Yarrow stops bleeding, calms inflamed tissue, and helps a wound close cleanly without becoming infected. What makes yarrow genuinely rare is that it does two opposing things at once. It stops bleeding instantly, and at the same time it helps the wound heal. Most plants do one or the other. Yarrow does both, in the same application, on the same wound, at the same moment. The plant grows wild across North America and Europe, producing flat clusters of small white or pink flowers on tall sturdy stems that you have probably walked past dozens of times without noticing. The entire upper portion of the plant carries medicine. Crush a few fresh leaves between your fingers, press them onto a cut, and within minutes the bleeding slows and the pain begins to retreat. A tea of the dried flowering tops can be sipped during a fever to help the body break it cleanly through gentle sweating. Yarrow was forgotten because synthetic clotting agents became cheaper and easier. But for anyone hiking, camping, or simply living far from a hospital, knowing this plant grows quietly somewhere within walking distance can change the outcome of a serious moment. Number 3. Plantain. And no, not the banana-like fruit. The low-growing wildweed with broad oval leaves and slender flower spikes, growing in your lawn, your driveway cracks, your hiking trails, and almost every disturbed patch of soil in this country. This is the plant that literally everyone walks past every single day and almost nobody recognizes. Plantago major was called white man's footprint by Native Americans, because it seemed to grow wherever European settlers walked. But they very quickly learned that this humble unimpressive weed could treat cuts, burns, insect bites, and skin infections better than almost anything else available out on the trail, and modern research backs all of this completely. Studies confirm plantain has genuine wound healing activity, real antimicrobial effect, and a strong ability to calm inflamed tissue on the surface of the skin. One Iranian clinical trial actually found that plantain ointment healed second-degree burns faster than the standard hospital treatment. The leaves contain mucilage and other gentle compounds that soothe inflammation, stop minor bleeding, and discourage infection from setting in. The traditional method is almost embarrassing in how simple it is. You pluck a fresh leaf, chew it briefly between your teeth to break down the cell walls, and apply that softened paste directly onto a sting, bite, cut, or scrape. Within minutes the pain begins to ease and the swelling starts to retreat. You can also boil the dried leaves into a strong wash for skin problems or use the tea as a gentle gargle for sore throats. Plantain disappeared from public awareness for one quiet reason. It is a weed. It is everywhere. We have been carefully trained to believe that real medicine must be rare and expensive, never growing in the cracks of our sidewalks. But the truth is the opposite of that programming. The most reliable first aid plant on this continent is the same green weed you mowed over last weekend without a second thought. For minor injuries, bug stings, small burns, and trail accidents, plantain is immediate, completely free, and remarkably effective. What you are looking at, every time you step outside, is one of the oldest first aid kits on the planet sitting at your feet. It is not asking for anything in return. It is simply waiting to be remembered. Once you remember it, you will never look at a lawn the same way again, and that single shift is enough to change how you respond to 100 small emergencies for the rest of your life. Number 4. Mullein. That tall striking plant with fuzzy silver leaves and a long spike of yellow flowers you have probably driven past 1,000 times growing in vacant lots and along the shoulders of country roads. For hundreds of years across multiple continents, mullein was the universal answer to any kind of lung congestion. Coughs that refused to break. Bronchitis. Asthma. Chest colds choked with thick stubborn mucus that refused to clear. Verbascum species were used so consistently for respiratory problems that traditional European herbalists called it the lung's best friend, and the name stuck for centuries. The leaves carry compounds called saponins that act as natural expectorants, helping the body cough up mucus and clear it out of the chest, instead of allowing it to sit there feeding a deeper infection underneath. Recent research has confirmed Mullein's ability to calm inflamed respiratory tissue and discourage several common respiratory microbes from settling in. The traditional preparation is simple but specific. You brew a strong tea from the dried leaves, then carefully strain it through fine cloth to remove the tiny irritating hairs that line the underside of every single leaf. You drink that tea 2 or 3 times a day at the first sign of chest congestion. In older households, the flowers were also infused in olive oil and used as warm drops for stubborn ear infections in children, a remedy that is still passed down quietly in many families today. Mullein fell out of mainstream use the moment commercial cough syrups arrived on pharmacy shelves. But those modern products almost always silence the cough without actually helping the lungs clear what is causing it. Mullein helps the body do what it is already trying to do, which is move the infection up and out. If you have ever had a chest cold that simply refused to break, Mullein is still standing wild on the edges of empty fields, still completely free, and still working exactly the way it always has. Number 5. The toothache plant. And this is where the list takes a turn that you are not going to forget for the rest of your life. Spilantzacmella is a small bushy plant that produces strange yellow and red flowers shaped almost like tiny spaceships, and inside those flowers lives a compound called spilanthol that creates an effect so immediate, so intense, and so unmistakable that almost everyone laughs out loud the first time they experience it. Chew a single fresh flower. Within seconds, your entire mouth begins to tingle as if it has been brushed with electricity. A few seconds more, and the whole inside of your mouth goes completely numb. Traditional healers across the Americas, Africa, and parts of Asia used this plant for exactly what the name suggests: toothaches. But also mouth ulcers, sore gums, painful canker sores, sore throats, and any oral condition where reaching the source of the pain with conventional medicine was almost impossible. Modern research has fully confirmed the local anesthetic and pain-relieving activity of spilanthol, and the plant is still used in several traditional medicine systems for oral pain today. It is even being studied for new uses in dental care precisely because the numbing effect is so powerful, so localized, and so remarkably safe. The plant grows easily in warm climates and can be cultivated in pots indoors during cold months. The flowers carry the strongest effect, but the leaves work too. The traditional use is almost theatrical in its simplicity. At the first sign of tooth pain or mouth pain of any kind, you pluck a fresh flower, place it onto the painful area, and let it slowly release its compounds directly into the tissue. The numbing effect can last for 30 minutes or longer from a single flower. It does not solve the underlying cause of the pain, but it gives the body real relief while you decide what to do next. The toothache plant got mostly forgotten in the Western world for one practical reason. The pharmacy aisle is full of numbing gels and plastic tubes, and we have been quietly taught not to look any further than that. But for anyone interested in real natural pain relief, or anyone who has ever experienced a sudden midnight toothache far from anywhere open, this plant is genuinely shocking. First-time users almost always laugh, then go quiet, then start asking how they never knew this existed. That question is the entire reason this channel exists. Number 6. Comfrey. The bone knitter. Of all the folk names in herbal medicine, this one might be the most descriptive. Knit bone. For more than 1,000 years across multiple cultures, people applied comfrey root and leaves externally on broken bones, deep sprains, painful bruises, and torn soft tissue, and they swore over generations that comfrey made the healing happen visibly faster than nature would do on its own. They were absolutely right, and modern science has now caught up to confirm it. Symphytum officinale contains a remarkable compound called allantoin that promotes cell proliferation. In plain language, it tells your tissue cells to multiply and rebuild damaged structures more quickly than they would without help. This is not folklore. This is documented cellular behavior with real published trials behind it. Multiple modern peer-reviewed clinical trials have proven that topical comfrey root extract significantly reduces pain and improves recovery in back pain, ankle sprains, abrasions, deep bruises, and osteoarthritis. These are not weak studies. These are real published trials with measurable outcomes. Now, here is the absolutely critical part of this conversation. Comfrey is for external use only. The plant contains compounds called pyrrolizidine alkaloids that can quietly damage the liver if taken internally over time, which is why traditional internal use has been correctly restricted in modern herbalism. But applied externally as a salve, cream, or warm poultice over a sprain or a bruise, it is remarkably safe and remarkably effective. The traditional preparation is to infuse the dried root slowly in oil for several weeks, then thicken the strained oil with beeswax into a salve you keep on the shelf for the next time your body decides to land badly on a stairway. For the soft tissue injuries that happen constantly in real life, the strained backs, the rolled ankles, the bruised muscles, Comfrey is still one of the fastest healers nature has ever produced. It is the plant that quietly tells your body to repair itself faster than it usually would, and the more you understand what is actually happening at the cellular level inside the wound, the more remarkable it becomes. This is the kind of knowledge that used to live in every household kitchen, and we lost it within 2 generations of being told that real medicine only comes in a sealed bottle from behind a counter. Number 7. White Horehound. The original cough drop, sold in every pharmacy long before synthetic medicine even existed. Before there were commercial cough drops, there was Horehound candy. Marubium vulgar was so reliably effective for stubborn coughs that people across Europe and North America boiled it down into hard candy and lozenges, sold in every pharmacy and general store well into the early 20th century. Horehound is what herbalists call a classic expectorant. It does not suppress your cough. It improves it. It helps the body cough more productively, moving infected mucus up and out of the lungs instead of leaving it sitting there to deepen into pneumonia. The plant contains a compound called marubian that gently stimulates bronchial secretions and helps break apart thick stubborn congestion. The plant itself grows as a bushy perennial with fuzzy gray-green leaves and small white flowers, and it is easy to identify once you have seen it just once. The entire upper portion is harvested, dried, and used. Traditionally, people brewed a strong bitter tea sweetened with honey and lemon, or they boiled the strong tea down with sugar until it crystallized into actual horehound candy that could be carried in a pocket and slowly dissolved through the day. The difference between horehound and modern cough suppressants is fundamental in a way almost nobody discusses anymore. A modern cough suppressant silences the cough so you stop bothering everyone around you. Horehound helps your lungs do exactly what they are trying to do, which is move the infection out. The first approach manages your symptoms socially. The second one actually helps you heal. That distinction is the entire story of why so many of these plants were buried by an industry that profits from managed symptoms rather than complete healing. And number 8. Heal all. And yes, that is genuinely the name of this plant. Heal all. Self-heal. The plant that names itself with absolute confidence and dares you to test it. Prunella vulgaris was applied to virtually any kind of wound, sore throat, mouth ulcer, or inflamed tissue across centuries of folk medicine, and people trusted it enough to give it the boldest name in all of herbalism. The plant that decided to tell you what it does before you even reach down to pick it up. Modern research is quietly validating that confidence with serious evidence. Recent reviews show Heal All has real wound healing activity, calms inflamed tissue, and even disrupts bacterial biofilms, those slimy protective layers bacteria construct to make infections harder for the immune system to break through. That last one is enormous, because biofilm-related infections are some of the hardest conditions to clear in modern medicine. The plant grows low to the ground in lawns and meadows, producing small purple flower spikes that honeybees absolutely love. The whole plant carries medicine, from the leaves to the flowers. A strong tea brewed from the dried plant can be used as a mouth rinse for canker sores or as a gargle for raw inflamed throats. Crushed fresh leaves can be pressed directly onto minor cuts and scrapes for immediate relief. What makes Heal All particularly remarkable is how effectively it works on the mucous membranes lining your mouth, throat, and digestive tract, which are exactly the tissues that almost nothing else can reach. A simple cup of Heal All tea, used as a gargle 3 times a day, can bring real relief to a stubborn sore throat within hours. The plant disappeared from mainstream use because, like so many other wild healers on this list, it is a common weed that no company on earth can patent. Let me pause here for a quiet moment to share something with you, because the depth of what we are exploring matters to me personally. Everything I bring to this channel comes from years of working as a holistic natural therapist, with medicinal plants at the center of my daily clinical practice. The people I have walked alongside in healing taught me something the textbooks rarely admit, which is that the body almost always knows what to do, the moment we stop interrupting it. My deepest specialty is actually aromatherapy, the world of essential oils, where many of these same plants reveal a concentrated form of their medicine that borders on the miraculous. Some of my favorite personal treatments use a single drop of an oil distilled from a plant most people would walk past on a hike without ever looking down. That is the next territory we are going to explore together, very soon, in a video dedicated entirely to forgotten essential oils that ancient healers reached for when nothing else could touch what needed healing. Stay close to this channel and make sure you have already subscribed, because I am constantly publishing exactly this kind of knowledge here, exactly when most people need it without realizing they were searching for it. Number 9. Boneset. The flu fighter that carried entire American towns through the great influenza epidemics of the 1800s. This plant deserves far more respect than it currently gets, because there was a moment in history when almost every household in the country kept a small bundle of dried boneset hanging quietly in the kitchen, because the fever and crushing body aches of severe flu were inevitable, and this plant was the most trusted defense against them. The folk name boneset comes from a chilling source. The deep crushing muscle aches of 19th century flu were known as breakbone fever, because the pain was so intense that people genuinely believed their bones were breaking apart. This single plant seemed to pull people back from the edge of it, again and again, across entire epidemics, and Eupatorium perfoliatum was one of the most important medicines during the great influenza waves of the 1800s. People brewed a hot bitter tea from the dried leaves and flowers, drank a full cup at the very first sign of flu symptoms, climbed under heavy blankets, and sweated the illness out through the night. Traditional sources describe boneset as a powerful febrifuge, meaning it helps the body break a fever cleanly, and also as a strong immune stimulant during acute infection. The plant grows in damp meadows and along streams, producing flat clusters of white flowers in late summer. The flavor of the tea is shockingly bitter, almost dramatically so. Some herbalists insist that deep bitterness is exactly why it works, because that level of bitterness wakes up the entire digestive and immune system at once. Boneset got forgotten as vaccines and antiviral drugs entered the medical landscape. But for the everyday flu-like illnesses that still slam through every winter, this plant remains one of the most powerful traditional remedies ever recorded, quietly waiting in meadows for someone to remember what it can do. Number 10. Elecampane. The deep lung tonic for stubborn chronic respiratory weakness. This is where the conversation about lung medicine gets seriously interesting, because elecampane is not a remedy for the cough you have today. It is a remedy for the cough that has lingered in your chest for months, the bronchitis that refuses to fully resolve, the deep wet productive cough that drags on long after the original cold should have ended. Inula helenium is what herbalists reach for when the lungs are not just sick, but tired. Worn down. Carrying the residue of an infection that should have already healed but somehow never fully did. The thick aromatic root of elecampane contains compounds called sesquiterpene lactones that calm coughing, fight respiratory microbes, and gently rebuild damaged lung tissue over time. Recent research confirms real antimicrobial activity against several respiratory pathogens, including some that have grown resistant to standard antibiotics. The plant itself grows as a tall striking perennial with huge furry leaves and yellow sunflower-like blooms that almost look out of proportion to the rest of the plant. The thick roots are harvested in fall, dried, and used in slow-simmered decoctions or alcohol tinctures. The flavor is complex, slightly bitter, warming, with an almost spicy aromatic edge. The traditional approach is to take elecampane in small frequent doses over weeks and sometimes months. It is not a fast remedy. It is a deep tonic that slowly rebuilds respiratory tissue, working the way the body itself heals, layer by layer, from the inside out. Number 11. Blue Vervain. The plant for the modern mind that refuses to stop running. Of every plant on this list, blue vervain might be the most relevant to the world we are actually living in right now. Verbena hostata and its close cousin Verbena officinalis were used across centuries for nervous exhaustion, anxiety, mental tension, stress headaches, and insomnia driven by an overactive racing mind. Traditional herbalists described Vervain as a remedy for the kind of person who is wound too tight, overthinking, mentally exhausted but unable to slow down, tense even in sleep, carrying the entire world inside their nervous system and unable to put it down. If that sentence just described someone you know, or someone you have been for years, this plant was made for them. A growing body of preliminary research suggests Vervain genuinely calms nervous tension without sedating the body into a fog. The plant grows wild in wet meadows and roadside ditches, producing tall spikes of tiny purple-blue flowers that you will start to notice everywhere once you know what they look like. A cup of the bitter tea in the evening helps the nervous system finally release the grip it has been holding all day, without the rebound effects or dependence that come with most pharmaceutical sleep aids. The taste is bitter enough that most people combine it with chamomile or honey, but that bitterness is doing real work, signaling the body to shift from sympathetic stress into parasympathetic rest. Vervain offers a far gentler approach than the chemical solutions modern medicine usually reaches for first, and it has done so for centuries before anyone invented the word anxiety. Number 12. Agrimony. The throat soother that medieval herbalists treasured almost as a household staple. Agrimonia eupatoria produces tall slender spikes of tiny yellow flowers and carries a long history as a gargle for inflamed throats and a gentle tea for mild diarrhea and digestive upset. Historical reviews describe agrimony being used for sore throats, pharyngitis, tonsillitis, laryngitis, urinary irritation, sluggish digestion, and chronic wounds that simply refuse to close. The plant contains tannins, natural astringent compounds that gently tighten and tone inflamed tissue rather than masking the symptom underneath. Traditionally, a strong tea was used as a gargle several times a day for raw throats, or sipped slowly for mild gut upset. Agrimony grows wild in meadows and woodland edges, blooming in summer, and the whole upper plant is dried for tea with a surprisingly pleasant taste. We are about to head into the strangest plant story on this entire list, involving Soviet cosmonauts in outer space and a wild orange berry that protected their bodies in a way modern medicine still does not fully understand. Number 13. Sea buckthorn. The Himalayan skin healer that Russian cosmonauts trusted in outer space. This is one of those plant stories that sounds almost like science fiction until you check the actual sources. Sea buckthorn is a spiny shrub that produces bright orange berries on tough thorny branches, and it has been used in Tibetan, Russian, and traditional Chinese medicine for centuries, specifically for healing the skin and the delicate mucous membranes inside the body. Then modern science met it, and the story took a turn no one expected. Hippophae rhamnoids produces berries so dense in vitamins, antioxidants, and rare omega fatty acids that the Soviet space program added sea buckthorn oil to its protocols, to protect cosmonauts against the harsh radiation of orbit and the physical punishment of long missions outside the atmosphere. Let that fact settle for a moment. A wild orange berry, treated as serious space-age medical protection. Recent human studies show that sea buckthorn oil improves skin barrier function, accelerates the healing of damaged skin, and soothes dry inflamed mucous membranes throughout the entire body, everywhere from the eyes to the deepest layers of the gut. The oil from both the berries and the seeds contains a rare omega-7 fatty acid that supports mucous membrane health from the inside out, which almost nothing else in the natural world provides in this concentration. Clinical trials have shown improvement in dry skin, eczema, atopic dermatitis, dry eye syndrome, and even vaginal dryness after menopause. Sea buckthorn faded from Western awareness only because it grows in punishing remote climates. The Himalayas, Siberia, high mountain regions where almost nothing else survives. But it can now be grown in cold climate gardens, and the oil is widely available as a supplement. For anyone living with chronically dry or inflamed skin and mucous tissue, this berry does what most moisturizers only pretend to do. It heals from the inside outward. Number 14. Yellow dock. The quiet liver and digestion ally hiding along every roadside. Yellow dock is what old herbalists called an alterative herb. They called these plants blood purifiers, but what they really meant was that they help the body process and eliminate waste more efficiently from the inside out. Rumex crispus root has been used for centuries for sluggish digestion, stubborn constipation, and the kind of chronic skin issues that seemed mysteriously connected to poor internal cleansing. The root carries bitter compounds and gentle anthraquinones that stimulate bile production and wake up sleepy digestive function without aggressively forcing the body to react. Modern herbal reviews link yellow dock with supporting liver activity, improving digestion, and helping chronic skin problems clear as internal elimination improves. Many people quietly find that stubborn skin issues fade once their gut finally starts working properly, because skin so often reflects the deeper internal terrain that no one ever taught us to look at. Number 15. Red clover. The field medicine flower carpeting almost every meadow in the country, dismissed by most people as just another lawn weed. But Trifolium pratense has been used medicinally for centuries, particularly for chronic skin conditions, deep inflammation, and women's health issues that mainstream medicine still quietly struggles to manage well. Recent studies have validated several of these traditional uses with real published evidence. Red clover contains isoflavones, gentle plant compounds with mild estrogenic activity. Research shows real benefits for menopausal hot flashes, and traditional use includes both topical application for skin healing and internal use as a gentle support during the long transition of menopause itself. The flower heads also carry compounds that calm inflammation throughout the body, which is why red clover became an ingredient in countless folk preparations for stubborn chronic skin problems like eczema and psoriasis. You can harvest the bright pink-purple flower heads from clean fields, never sprayed with chemicals, dry them carefully, and brew them into a mild, slightly sweet tea that is genuinely pleasant to drink. Red clover was traditionally used over long stretches of time for chronic conditions, weeks or sometimes months of regular tea, because that is the timescale on which the body actually heals from the inside. If you are still here with me, recognizing the depth of what is being shared, take a moment to like this video. Number 16. Sassafras. The historical fever fighter with one of the most complicated legacies in herbal medicine. Sassafras deserves to be on this list precisely because it teaches us something important about how to think about plant medicine. Native Americans used sassafras root and bark for fevers, rheumatic pain, and digestive complaints across multiple tribes and regions for hundreds of years. The roots carry a distinctive spicy fragrance, and the plant was so commercially valued that it was later used to flavor early root beer for generations. Traditional uses included reducing fever, easing joint inflammation, and calming digestive trouble. The aromatic oils in the plant have a warming, stimulating effect on the body. However, and this part matters more than the celebration of the plant, sassafras contains a compound called safrole that has been shown to carry potential liver toxicity and possible carcinogenic effects when consumed regularly in significant amounts. Because of this, internal use is now restricted in many countries, including the United States. Sassafras is mostly historical at this point. Important to know about, important to understand in context, but no longer recommended for regular internal consumption given what modern research has revealed about its chemistry. This is actually a beautiful example of how traditional knowledge and modern science can work together rather than against each other. Tradition tells us what to investigate. Modern testing tells us how to use it safely, or when to honor it and step back with respect. Sassafras quietly reminds us that natural does not always mean safe in unlimited quantities. Respect, in plant medicine, is everything. Number 17. Oregon grape. The skin healer with serious modern clinical evidence behind it. Oregon grape is not actually a grape, which surprises almost everyone who hears its name for the first time. It is a spiky-leaved evergreen shrub with bright yellow flowers and small dark blue berries. But Mahonia aquifolium carries something that places it among the most important plants on this entire list. It is one of the rare herbs with published clinical evidence for treating chronic frustrating skin conditions like psoriasis. Multiple human studies have demonstrated that topical Oregon grape extract significantly improves psoriasis and atopic dermatitis symptoms when used consistently over a period of weeks. The bright yellow inner bark of the roots and stems contains the medicinal compounds, primarily berberine and other alkaloids that calm skin inflammation and discourage the microbial imbalance that often worsens these conditions. For anyone living with chronic stubborn inflamed skin, Oregon grape is genuinely worth seeking out. the improvement is not instant. You need to apply it consistently for weeks, but the change can be measurable, and it is documented in real modern published science. Oregon grape disappeared from mainstream awareness simply because it grows mainly in the Pacific Northwest and was not widely available elsewhere until recently. But for anyone whose skin has been struggling for years against conditions that mainstream medicine has barely managed, this plant is one of the most quietly powerful options on the entire continent. Number 18. Usnea. The wilderness antibiotic quietly hanging from forest trees. Usnea is not technically a plant at all. It is a lichen, a symbiotic organism that grows hanging from tree branches like pale green hair, which is exactly why traditional names for it include old man's beard. But this humble unassuming lichen carries some of the most remarkable medicinal properties in nature. Usnea species contain usnic acid and related compounds with strong activity against microbes, including some bacterial strains that have grown resistant to modern antibiotics. That last fact is not small. As antibiotic resistance becomes one of the most serious problems in modern medicine, plants and lichens like Usnea are receiving renewed scientific attention. Traditional use was primarily topical, crushing fresh lichen onto wounds and infections, or preparing an alcohol tincture as antiseptic wash and internal immune support. If you cut yourself deep on a wilderness hike, fresh Usnea moistened in clean water can be applied directly to the wound as a real natural antimicrobial dressing. Number 19. Barberry. The ancient antimicrobial that modern medicine is finally taking seriously. Barberry deserves the second to last spot on this list because the science behind it is genuinely undeniable, and the history is more than 2,000 years deep. Berberis vulgaris contains an alkaloid called berberine that has become one of the most heavily studied plant compounds in all of modern medical research. Berberine carries documented activity against bacteria, fungi, and parasites. It calms inflammation. It supports digestive health. It helps with diarrhea, especially the infectious kind that has dragged through hospital wards for generations. Recent research even shows real metabolic benefits, including improved blood sugar regulation and healthier cholesterol patterns over time, which has placed berberine in serious scientific conversation as a natural compound with measurable effects on metabolic disease. Traditional use of barberry stretches back through millennia, appearing in ancient Persian medicine, Ayurveda, and traditional Chinese medicine, always for the same kinds of conditions. The bright yellow inner bark of the roots and stems contains the highest concentration of berberine. It can be prepared as a strong tea, an alcohol tincture, or a concentrated extract. The flavor is intensely bitter, almost shockingly so, and that bitterness is part of why it is so effective for digestive problems. It wakes up the entire digestive system from top to bottom. What makes barberry particularly remarkable is that it is one of those rare plants where ancient tradition and modern laboratory science align almost perfectly. The ancient healers used it for digestive infections, liver problems, and inflammatory conditions. Modern research confirms antimicrobial, inflammation calming, liver protective, and metabolic effects. The evidence is no longer in question. With antibiotic resistance now becoming one of the most terrifying problems in modern medicine, berberine-containing plants like barberry are receiving fresh attention from researchers around the world. It is ancient medicine becoming cutting edge again, because we are quietly running out of alternatives. Number 20. Meadowsweet. The plant that became the foundation of the entire modern painkiller industry. And here we are at the final plant, the one I promised you at the very beginning of this video. The wild meadow flower that gave birth to aspirin itself, and that almost no one outside of traditional herbalism remembers anymore. Filipendula ulmaria is the plant that synthetic aspirin was originally based on. Before the synthetic version existed, people across Europe used meadowsweet for pain, fever, inflammation, and remarkably, for stomach irritation. Here is the part of this story that is going to change the way you look at every pharmacy you walk into for the rest of your life. Meadowsweet contains salicylates, the same family of compounds that aspirin is built on. When chemists first synthesized aspirin in the 1800s, they isolated salicylic acid from plants exactly like Meadowsweet and willow bark /n/n, but here is the twist that changes everything. Meadowsweet does not cause the stomach irritation that aspirin so often does. In fact, traditional herbalists used meadowsweet specifically to soothe stomach inflammation while it relieved pain and fever at the same time. The whole plant offers a balanced healing effect that the isolated synthetic version somehow lost in translation. Read that sentence again, because it is the entire story of modern pharmacy in a single line. Nature created a complete medicine. Chemists took out one molecule. They threw the rest of the plant away. And the version they sold back to the world was less safe than the original it came from. That is not an attack on modern medicine. It is a precise description of what actually happened. Meadowsweet grows in wet meadows and along streams, producing creamy white clusters of fragrant flowers in summer that fill the air with a soft almond honey scent. It is still growing today, in ditches and meadows and forgotten edges of pastures, still relieving pain, still doing exactly what it has done for thousands of years, still waiting for someone to remember that sometimes the original whole plant is wiser than the isolated copy of itself. That deeper lesson about whole plants versus isolated molecules is exactly why I saved one more plant for the absolute end of this video. Because before we close this conversation, I need to talk to you about the one medicinal plant that you almost certainly already have somewhere inside your home right now, sitting quietly in a forgotten box in the back of your kitchen cabinet, or in a tin near the kettle, or wrapped in a small sachet you have not touched in months. A plant so familiar that you stopped really looking at it years ago. A plant so accessible that you would never imagine its actual depth. Number 21. The one you already know. Chamomile. Matricaria chamomilla, the small daisy-like flower with a white petal crown and a golden center, has been one of the most consistently documented medicinal plants in all of recorded human history. Ancient Egyptian healers were so devoted to chamomile that they dedicated the flower itself to Ra, the sun god, used it in sacred temple rituals, and applied it to almost every condition involving the nervous system, the skin, and the digestion. Greek physicians prescribed it across the ancient Mediterranean for fevers and stomach pain. Roman herbalists carried it across the entire empire. It appears in the Anglo-Saxon Nine Herbs Charm, one of the oldest surviving written records of herbal medicine in Europe. Medieval healers reached for chamomile through plagues, through childbirth complications, through every form of nervous exhaustion that crossed their thresholds. There is even an old gardener's tradition holding that planting chamomile beside other struggling plants would quietly heal them, which is why it earned the affectionate title of the plant's physician. Modern research has now caught up to confirm what generations of healers always knew through their hands. Chamomile carries documented effects on the nervous system, the digestive tract, the skin, and the immune response. Real published clinical trials have shown that consistent chamomile extract significantly reduces generalized anxiety symptoms, improves sleep quality and duration, calms irritable digestion, and supports recovery from chronic inflammation throughout the gut lining. The plant contains compounds called epigenonin, bisabolol, and camozoline, which act on the body in measurable, repeatable ways. Epigenonin binds to the same brain receptors that pharmaceutical anxiety medications target, but it does so gently, without creating dependence and without producing the rebound symptoms that plague those modern drugs. That alone places chamomile in a category almost nothing else inside your kitchen cabinet can occupy. It is not a folk remedy that survived by accident. It is one of the most scientifically validated nervous system allies on the entire planet, sitting inside a tea bag most people brew without ever thinking about what they are actually drinking. The way most people drink chamomile, 1 cup before bed when sleep refuses to come, barely scratches the surface of what this plant actually does inside the body. A consistent daily ritual of chamomile tea, taken before meals or quietly in the late afternoon, gently retrains a stressed nervous system over weeks of repetition. It softens the vagus nerve. It supports the integrity of the gut lining. It calms the slow-burning inflammation that quietly drives so many of the chronic conditions modern medicine still struggles to fully resolve. Topically, a strong cooled chamomile tea can soothe inflamed eyes, calm irritated skin, accelerate the healing of minor wounds, and ease infant colic when used correctly by trained hands. There is a precise reason chamomile is one of the very few plants considered safe and beneficial across infants, breastfeeding mothers, and people too sensitive for almost every other herb on this entire list. It is simultaneously one of the gentlest and one of the most powerful nervous system allies the natural world has ever produced. Almost nobody casually pulling a tea bag out of a box after dinner has any real idea how deep this plant actually goes. That is the final lesson of this entire video, and it might be the most important one of all. The most powerful medicines in your life are often the ones you have grown so used to seeing that you stop truly looking at them. 21 plants. 21 quiet reminders of what your body has always understood and what the modern world quietly trained you to forget. But here is the part that goes one full layer deeper, and it is exactly where the next video is going to take us. The chamomile flower drying in your kitchen cabinet right now is only one expression of this plant. There is another form of chamomile, the essential oil, where the deepest medicine of the entire plant becomes concentrated through steam distillation into a single drop of dark blue liquid. This oil contains a compound called chamazoline that does not even fully exist in the dried flower itself. It only forms during the distillation process, and it is one of the most powerful natural compounds for calming deep inflammation that science has ever studied. In the next video on this channel, I am going to take you completely inside the world of chamomile essential oil. The concentrated soul of this plant, in a form so potent that ancient healers used a single drop where they would otherwise have needed an entire pot of tea. If everything you learned today opened something quiet inside you, what is coming next is going to take you somewhere even deeper. Subscribe and stay close, because I am constantly publishing exactly this kind of knowledge here, and you do not want to miss what is coming. Tell me in the comments whether you already have chamomile in your kitchen right now, and which plant from this video surprised you the most. I read every single one. And I will see you in the next video.